Hey there, Hetty here. So this is fun. We've started a sort of call and response series with the comments on the topic of deity. I love all the free time. Like the statutory holiday should happen more often. So this time, the question was, if, as you say, Hecate could be just a nickname, if deviating from the most common interpretations of deities is okay, etc., what's the advantage of still trying to connect the entity one works with to an established deity at all? Why not just find a personal nickname that has no link to an established deity? Why research deities at all beyond a healthy general curiosity in a specific attempt to try to find a similar-ish one to what one is working with? You mentioned for inspiration, and that makes total sense to me once if you've zeroed in on an established deity. But before that, I'm going to start with the question, why not just find a personal nickname that has no link to an established deity? To which I would say, I think this is a totally valid choice, and it's one I have employed. In talking about my matron, I made vague reference to the fact that I work with other deities/guides, and for one of these, I've done exactly that. Generated my own name for her that I use in ritual and in writing because nothing else fits well or is appropriate as far as I'm concerned. In her case, her nature is extra debatable. While she is inarguably sacred to me, she probably wouldn't fit many others' definition of a deity. But this isn't the reason I created my own nomenclature. Instead, and as the author of the question I'm addressing insinuated, I did so because in this case I really didn't begin by imagining her to be one of the specific named gods of which I'm aware. I quote, met, unquote, her during the course of a personal journey in which she very clearly represented a particular combination of concepts and associations. In other words, the contact started with a clear sense of her purview and interests, and no sense at all where she might have come from or what else she might be about. I decided that instead of trying to track down some previously identified goddess who might manifest in the terms I had experienced, I'd just take her at face value and call her something I deemed appropriate. And I, at least, have found this an eminently useful approach. I'll say this, though. In naming her myself instead of tracking down potentially related pre-existing deities, I do think I've made a choice about the nature of our work together. Specifically, I think this approach encourages a deeper, more targeted exploration of the areas I have mentally dubbed her purview. In exchange, I think it reduces the number of domains I'm likely to be exposed to during the course of our work together, if only because I won't be coaxed in that direction by outside inspiration. So I anticipate depth at the expense of breadth. This is fine by me. Aside from being a drill deeper, not farther afield sort of person by nature, my practice does not typically want for avenues to explore, not least because my Hecate, who is the ever-present core of my personal spiritual path, has been a sort of divine matchmaker, introducing others to my practice over the years. This has happened twice in my solitary work. It was the case with the goddess above, as well as the one I'll speak about next. With the third deity I work with, I did not take the same route, despite likewise encountering him during ritual. With him, my sense of what he was all about was vague, and it was in symbols and imagery that I was left to understand who the hell he was and what he was doing there. It was in researching and investigating this imagery and symbolism that I was led to an eventual conclusion about who and what he was. The conclusion surprised me, even though it felt right. I might have just as easily, much more easily actually, given him my own pseudonym. But I didn't want to do that with him. I didn't feel like I had a grasp on him yet, didn't know enough to do the naming justice. And I felt like tracing his identity through research stood a good chance of helping me get that grip I sorely needed in order to have some idea of why he was there and what that might mean for my work. I therefore began calling him by the name my research turned up in that first clicked, although I soon thereafter also began using another pantheon's name I consider to be a cognate, in the ways that matter, a la Hermes Thoth. Even then, however, My perceptions of him and the specific domains I attribute to him do not jive entirely with the vast array of associations attributed to the names I use for him. Some do, very much, but in his case, it's really more about attitude, I guess, and the roles he's filled in the mythologies I associate with him. He has a certain feel, elicits a certain vibe, and possesses a modus operandi that fits my particular conceptualization of the gods whose names I've given him, including the attribute of being pretty fickle. Just as with Hecate, though, I am not confident he is what I call him. Actually, I'm less confident than with Hecate, as I don't feel like I know him nearly as well, for all that I've been working with him for several years now. The thing is, I encounter him irregularly and almost exclusively in the context of astral travel or journeying, and therein lies the lessons in communication we share. Funny story. Funny to me. I've meant to post some of my thoughts about techniques that I've found facilitate astral travel, but it's a weird area for me because I'm actually not good at inducing it myself. I've managed a couple of times and have a pretty good idea of what let me slip into the astral on those occasions, and I think that could be useful information, maybe helpful to one or two people out there. But I'm really super not expert at it. I am instead incredibly spoiled, a beneficiary of the mystical version of Born on Third, but I don't kid myself that I've hit a triple. My astral privilege, if you will, is a direct result of the fact that this god I've been talking about does the heavy lifting for me. It's one of the stranger, though not necessarily the strangest aspect of my practice. The fact that from time to time he'll quite literally just kind of show up and plop, pluck me into the astral without any of that tiresome breathing, meditation, visualization nonsense that others tell me allows the transition, but which I've never been able to get to work. With him, though, it's as quick as a snap of the fingers. I'm conscious one moment, become aware of his presence, and before I can finish thinking, oh, hey, you're here, I'm in the astral with him. It's happened far too many times to be coincidence at this point. And yeah, it's a relatively absurd phenomenon. Enough so that I can't possibly take offense at anybody else's knee-jerk response of bullshit. Because I get it. And if I could explain what precisely is going on there, or attribute it to the vagaries of sleep induction or lucid dreaming, I really would tell you so. For now, I only have the most tenuous understanding of what precipitates his arrival and his determination that our next life-changing lesson is happening now. Hope you're ready. If ever I manage to wrap my head around what the fuck is going on from a mechanistic standpoint, though, I'll let you know. Anyway, back to our scheduled programming. In providing more background about the deities I work with, I'm hoping that I've managed to illustrate the fact that any of the approaches our commenters suggested as alternatives do have a time and place, for me anyway. I can't claim any more objective insight than anyone else as far as what variables justify the use of one over the other, though. The best I can do is say that I did what made sense to me in each instance, and in each case ended up with a relationship that was eminently worthwhile. In the end, I once more have little recourse but to attribute the utility of each of these approaches to an outlook on the divine that allows for my own imprecision and uncertainty. I don't fret about the risk of getting some things wrong because I'm not under the illusion that I could avoid it. Mistakes and misattributions will happen, and if anything out there takes offense, well then, I guess that's how it goes. All the best to you in your search for a practitioner who's more to your liking. My quippy allusion to first dates with deities in the title of that first video on the topic wasn't arbitrary. Dates aren't an audition for one and an opportunity to judge for the other. It's a two-way interaction in which expression and judgment are divided equally between parties. If during the course of your search for a partner you can express that, I'm all over your interest in classic science fiction novels, but you'll have to find someone else to talk to about skateboarding, then I don't see why you can't do the same with the divine, spirits, guides, what have you. I mean, I interpret that God I was just talking about's complete lack of interest in interacting with me during the usual course of my rituals as his indifference to a lot of the things I do and care about. So be it. He's free to stick primarily to leading me an astral dance and showing up in circle only when I happen to do something that piques his interest. Nor do I think knowing family lineage, life history, or a complete rundown of the deity's aspirations and inclinations is necessary. I mean, that's a lot of information to pack into a first few sessions. These factors may ultimately be important to you as a practitioner, but there are many routes to getting that information, and not all require a first name up front. Actually, now that I'm saying this, I'm also wondering whether the issue in some cases isn't so much uncertainty about the best approach to identifying deities to work with as it is difficulty tolerating the mystery, the uncertainty of who or what one is communicating with. If so, starting with a name is an approach I would consider less prone to result in random who knows what interlopers answering one's call for company. And if this is more comfortable for a person, then it seems an entirely reasonable justification for starting with a named deity, even if one deems the fit imperfect, and just seeing where that leads. Finally, echoing my earlier point about depth versus breadth, beginning with a name whose associations aren't all hyper interesting to you can nevertheless be a great choice if one is open to being coaxed in new directions. In much of life, I've discovered that very few things remain uninteresting once I've learned enough about them. The same is likely true in this case. Many an intimate relationship has flourished despite the absence of that immediate sense of clicking, and a lot of immediate clicking leads to bust. So there you go. Some of my inklings about starting with a name, identity, versus creating a name versus starting with a few clues and working out which deities may fit from there. If nothing else, I hope you found the photo of my cat experiencing writer's block entertaining. Cheers to all, and all my best till next time.